What is up guys, DZeef here. Today I wanted to talk about Offerings to the Doomed, a card released all the way back in 2003 that recently has appeared in a few top cut deck lists. In today's video, we are going to talk about what Offerings to the Doomed actually accomplishes, where it's seen play in the past, and where it's seen play right now. By the way, this is my first video with a new microphone, so I do apologize if things sound a little bit different. I'm still figuring things out. I've done a couple test streams, but I have not quite got it to where I want it to, so let me know in the comments if you have any feedback, especially in regards to the volume of the video. Just in case you don't know, Offerings to the Doomed is a quick play spell card that simply says, target one face-up monster on the field, destroy that target, also skip your next draw phase. In many ways, this card is kind of like Raigeki Break, but instead of discarding a card initially when you activate it, you're giving up a future draw, which can be pretty appealing, especially if you don't have any cards in hand or if you don't want to discard any cards in your hand. Maybe you're more willing to give up a future draw of an unknown card than something that you already have access to. Being a quick play spell also is a huge advantage over a card like Raigeki Break because it means it's a lot more flexible, especially when you first draw it, because you don't have to set it and then wait a turn before using it. So if you are willing to give up that draw phase and if you really need a quick play destruction effect, Offerings to the Doomed is one of the best choices. Now, admittedly, even with its upsides, Offering really has not been that popular throughout the years. I mean, it saw fringe play back in the day, but I think the first time it started seeing widespread competitive use in one particular deck, not just at one tournament, but over the course of many tournaments, was back in December and November-ish of 2015 in Cosmos. So this was the second iteration of the Cosmo deck. We had just gotten Dark Destroyer, but we had not yet gotten Cosmojo and Tin Can, and at that time Cosmos were primarily an OTK deck, and one of the ways that people found that they could OTK was by using Offerings to the Doomed to pop their own spaceship to trigger its graveyard effect to banish itself and special summon a lower leveled Cosmo from their deck. And this worked. I mean, this really did. Multiple people got tops of this, including a YCS top, so not only was this a viable card in a topping strategy, but also those decks oftentimes played copies of Generation Shift, which is basically just a worse version of Offerings to the Doomed. That means that at that time, people were so willing to have a card like Offering to the Doomed in their deck that they were willing to play extra copies of a worse version just to have more consistent access to destruction effects. Now, if this card only topped back in 2015, I probably wouldn't be talking about it here, but like I said, this card is currently seeing play, so let's talk about that. I believe the first instance in 2022 of someone playing this card was at YCS Charlotte. At that event, there was a Sky Striker player that managed to make top 32 with 3 copies of Offerings in the main deck. Then, just a few months later, 2 different players topped the North American Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG Championship, which was the WCQ replacement, once again with main deck copies of Offerings to the Doomed in their Sky Striker decks. Not to mention that one of those topping players was Ryan Yu, who got second place at that event. So Offerings to the Doomed just got a few weeks ago a second place in 2022 at one of the biggest tournaments of the year. Now, what I find pretty interesting about this is that those 2 events were pretty different format-wise. At Charlotte, you had Anaconda still legal, you had Prank Kid Meow Meow still legal, and that was actually pre-branded structure deck, so it was a pretty different event than a few months later at the North American TCG Championship. But despite the differences, Offerings to the Doomed was still played in those Sky Striker decks. So what are the reasons that this card is good in Sky Strikers? Why are players suddenly picking it up? Well, there are a couple. The main one that a lot of those players talk about in their deck profiles is that the Sky Striker lists that those guys were playing are very Mystic Mine based. Mystic Mine is a very important card for the Sky Striker deck right now, and while I'm not the biggest fan of that card existing, obviously if it's in the game, people are going to use it, and it is quite good in the Sky Striker deck. It's been topping all over the place for a long time now, but especially right now with the Sky Striker deck that plays Mystic Mine, one of the best ways to counter Mystic Mine is with Draco back, which a lot of you Master Duel players probably know about because it was just added, but that obviously can bounce the Mystic Mine back to the opponent's hand without using any monster effects. So to counter the opponent's counter of Draco back, you can play Offerings to the Doomed to pop the token so that your Mystic Mine can't get bounced. Now, what you have to remember here is that even though it might sound like a very specific situation, you know, the Draco back versus Mystic Mine, those Sky Striker players knew they were entering tournaments where the Adventurer token engine was going to be very popular. And when you have an engine that's very popular that outs one of your win conditions, Mystic Mine, you probably need to play a couple counters to it. Now, why was it main decked instead of side decked? Well, it's pretty straightforward to me at least. I think it's because Mystic Mine is a lot better in general in game 1 versus games 2 and 3, because in games 2 and 3 a lot of players will bring in back row removal to beat it, but in game 1 maybe a player's only out to Mystic Mine is that Draco back, so if you have an Offerings to the Doomed to counter the Draco back, you'll pretty much guarantee a game 1 win. But the card definitely has other uses. So if you remember when I was talking about the Raigeki Break comparison, one thing that I mentioned was that this card is a quick play spell card, which matters for a few different reasons. For example, if you are going second, Offerings to the Doomed can just be a good removal card, or at the very least a card that can bait negates. It's actually particularly good against cards like Grandmaster. You know, Shishao is a really popular ending board card for Sword Soul because they always make it in the regular combo, and if they end with Shishao Blackout, you can go like Offerings to the Doomed to pop the Shishao, which not only takes the Shishao off the board, but could potentially take the only worm they have off the board, which would prevent the Blackout from being used as well. So it definitely does have a number of uses when going second, not to mention that you can use it going first or second to dodge effect negation on your Sky Striker Link monsters. So if you like summon a Sky Striker Kagari, you really need to add back a card and your opponent goes Veiler or Imperm, now you can chain the Offerings to the Doomed, which will then destroy the Kagari so that it can actually resolve. Offering is also specifically a spell card, which does matter in the Sky Striker deck because, as a lot of you are probably already aware, these Sky Striker spells have bonus abilities if you have 3 spell cards in grave when you use them. Ryan also mentioned in his deck profile that if any of his opponents knew what he was playing, especially as the tournament went on and you got to like top cut, he could then use the Offerings to the Doomed as an interruption even when going first. This is pretty important, by the way, because Ryan Yu is a well-known player and a lot of Sky Striker decks right now are choosing to go second. So if it got around the room that, oh, Ryan is on Sky Striker, some of his opponents, especially in Top Cut, once everyone kind of knows what everyone else is playing, might have made him go first, which would have made the Offerings to the Doomed a pretty good draw in that situation. What I think makes Offering to the Doomed so unique and so much fun to talk about is that it's a card that basically has only seen competitive play 2 different times, but with those 2 different times, it saw play for 2 very different reasons. In that first example with the 2015 Cosmo decks, it was being used to destroy your own cards to go for OTKs. Now though, in 2022, it's being used to protect a very annoying field spell against an engine that's very popular. I find this pretty interesting and I hope that you guys do as well, and it's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this card in today's video. I believe this video will go up on my birthday, and if you guys have been longtime subscribers, you might know this, but usually on my birthday, I try to make a discussion that maybe won't get the most amount of views, but it's something that I really want to talk about, and I really did want to discuss this card, so I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. By the way, thank you to anyone that came out to my birthday live stream, which at the time of this being posted will actually have already concluded, but I do hope you guys had a good time. I'm sure it was a lot of fun. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below, have you tried to play this card in any decks? Personally, I did try it out in Cosmos way back in the day, but I have not played these new Sky Striker decks that use it. Let me know in the comment section below if you found any cool uses for it, though. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'll see you guys later, though. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.